Hey everyone, I'm Doug Parker coming to you from Burbank, California. Warner Brothers relocated me here about 2 years ago from Brooklyn, where I lived for 22 years with my family. I'm currently the VP of Creative for the centralized design team at WarnerMedia. My talented crew handles the UX and UI for Warner Brothers, for DC, for Harry Potter, Ellen, and a bunch of other really cool brands. Over the past 2 decades, I've had an interesting career that's led me through the doors of some of the biggest entertainment brands. And it's allowed me to design in almost every medium possible, which has been amazing. So hopefully I can offer a little bit of insight today. So thanks for having me.
Hi there, I'm Jonathan Greenblatt. I was based in New York City for about 15 years, but moved with my family over to Bristol, England, just 1 year ago, which is kind of nuts. But it's a great city and I highly recommend a visit. I worked with Doug as a senior product designer at WarnerMedia, where I eventually took the leap to lead an embedded user research team within our department. For the past 10 years, I've worked at the intersection of research and design, and I firmly believe in the value of using insights to inform design choices, both big and small. So really excited to speak with you today.
Cool. All right, so here's our agenda. We only have 30 minutes, so we hope you guys walk away with something valuable. So let's jump right in. All right, so why is data-driven decision-making so important? Why bother to take the time to test anything? We're all experts, right? I mean, I've been in the UX UI game for well over 20 years now. But if there's one lesson I've learned, it's that we're all just putting forth our best guess. Everyone has an opinion about what will work and what won't. But no one truly knows the correct answer to everything. We accumulate experience and expertise, which leads us to certain assumptions, but in the end, we're all just winging it. And that's exactly why user testing is so important. Every assumption can be challenged and certified. Every unknown becomes known. If you think you're right, great, test it, prove it, and use that proof to back up your claims. In order to fight for the folks using our products, and to make the best user experience possible, evidencing design decisions with user research and data is the only way to send up a flare that grabs the attention stakeholders further up the chain. All right, so as designers, our goal is to make beautiful, easy to use products that also achieve clear business objectives. So we need to ensure the way we organize and label content mirrors our users' language. We need to unpack and analyze how the flows and design systems that we've obsessed over are actually interacted with by people and how closely this matches what they are trying to achieve. So there are many, many layers to it all. And the only way to answer these questions is by conducting user research. And what I love about user testing is the speed, right? Using usertesting.com is enormously fast. So working within a large media conglomerate like WarnerMedia is both incredible, but it's also cumbersome. Right, so working within that large organization gives you access to amazing resources, but also, if we're being honest, it's incredibly slow. So, for example, you're competing with other brands for attention. So what happens is user testing allows you to take your assumptions and test them incredibly quick. You can throw your ideas in front of qualified users and get your feedback and start implementing within 24 hours. With having said that, that brings us to our story at WarnerMedia and Jonathan. So let's give him a taste of what went down.
Cool. So what is our story? And in really, how do you get started? I think probably right off the top, most important is you really need the dedicated person, in this case me, to take on the new capability. You can't expect the product team to own it. You definitely can't expect anybody to ask you for it. That would be ideal. You need to go after it and prove how useful it is with the first project. Luckily, Doug waved his magic wand and allowed me to take that ownership over this role within our design team. So I wasn't able to be 100% on user research, but around 70% capacity, I was still able to accomplish quite a lot, a great deal as a user research team of one. Okay, so how do you get this into the design process? So we have these meetings like product roadmap and sprint planning, and really your goal in the beginning is just to get user research on the agenda. You got to show up to these meetings with an understanding of where you think the biggest gaps are, in terms of, like the assumptions Doug spoke about. And you show up to those meetings with those in mind, and just be careful. Just when you're initiating this contact, don't force it. You need to be a researcher there in that meeting already. You listen to what's being discussed, and really find, understand, where priorities are, and find your chance to wedge in some time for a test when it's most appropriate. And timing really is everything. Sprint cycles in our organization were 2 weeks. And in order to effectively run a test, it's possible to complete research project sort of snout to tail within 2 weeks, but it's much more realistic to do it over 2 sprints, which is 4 weeks. So with that in mind, you need to think about your needs at the time you're starting. Are there any features in the discovery phase? Maybe you could plan to test some wireframes of 2 different versions of a given feature, or perhaps there are some features that you hear rumblings of negative customer feedback on. Whatever it is, don't just think about running the research. Think about how you're going to take the learnings and make an impact after the study is complete. That's a super important piece. And in order to do that effectively, you need to think about the product roadmap, or talk with your product and tech managers to understand what developers will be working on after you anticipate having those results in hands. The other thing is bringing people together. So, part of our story is we created a cross-disciplinary team under the title of user research and feedback. So that user research wasn't just this isolated task. It was part of this wider culture of focusing on customer feedback. With that in mind, we established a group that included data, customer service. In the case of DC Comics, we had a community forum. So the forum moderator was a very important point person for that. And product managers, of course, and project managers, thinking about how all these pieces fit together. And what we're doing in that group is triaging the different inputs from the customers. And the group's collective power really is in identifying, what are the key things that we need to be working into research projects. But also the momentum coming out of that meeting is these folks are the same people that are sitting in the roadmap and the backlog meeting. So you already have sort of one foot in the door to move those conversations forward and get user research on the agenda. The last thing I'll say here, a lot to say on this slide, but when you get your chance, really beat the drum as loud as possible and share the highlight videos at the end. You set up watch parties if you can, and get other people's time to get them to just get their eyes on the videos, or even invite people from your team to interpret the results. Lots of times I pulled other designers on our crew. They wanted to be in that process, so inviting them in, or bringing in a developer who's going to be working on that feature. Just get them engaged as much as possible, because there's no way to be as compelling as letting somebody watch the video of somebody clicking 100 times on an icon that is not clickable, other than just watching it themselves. So now to give you a little bit more detail on some specific examples, I'm going to pass it back to Doug so he can talk through our first case study.
All right, cool. Thanks, Jonathan. So our first user case is DC Universe Infinite. And for those of you who don't know, DC is a legendary home of Batman and Wonder Woman and Superman. So that crew, they asked us and our team to create a new comic book subscription service. And this service would give customers access to the entire Epic DC catalog of over 25,000 comics. And that goes back over 80 years. So that's a daunting amount of comic books to navigate, right? So our ultimate goal was to understand how users, both those new to the comic book world, and the super fans, the folks who go to the Comic Cons every year and get dressed up, how they search and browse for comic content. So obviously we went in with our own assumptions. So here's how we tackled that challenge. We started by pulling in 15 participants, right? 7 directly from the DC community, those super fans, and then 4 directly or 4 current DC subscribers, and then 4 non-subscribers. And we use the general population tool from user testing. So this allowed us to validate our findings with both the superfans, and it also gave us the perspective of the newcomers. Okay, so going into testing, our team had a variety of assumptions. For example, should the service be utilitarian and focus on tools to search, filter, and sort, right? So only utilitarian. Or how do we categorize all of this content? Or when a new reader is interested in reading comic books, where do they start? So we had a ton of assumptions. And over the course of a few days, user testing allowed us to uncover some incredible and really surprising insights. So for example, the idea of navigating by storyline was extremely popular with superfans and the newcomers. So we realized a strong utilitarian search is important, but a curated discovery area that is handcrafted and pulled together can be extraordinarily powerful and intuitive too. So we realized our internal labeling of content areas, things like collections or comic series, things that we use internally, which seemed so obvious to us, had little meaning to the users, right? So we uncovered tidbits like that, but also we verified some of our assumptions as well. So for example, character-based navigation is where everybody starts, or our users love the community, where they can connect with other readers. So this testing allowed our UX UI design team to take those results and craft a way better V2 experience, one that focuses on the needs and allows us to craft a unique browsing discovery experience based on storylines and genre or creator, things that we were not even approaching before. It took us in a new direction. So just to add a bit more to that, here's a quick method tip from Jonathan.
Cool, thanks, Doug. This is a super tactical but time-saving tip. After you define your test objectives and have a clear plan of action for recruiting the appropriate audience segments, like Doug mentioned, looking from sort of expert readers to to the people who are newcomers to the service, then you can start in on your discussion guide, which ultimately you're going to be building on the user testing platform. So making some smart decisions at this point in the process will help you save time when you're synthesizing the findings into those clear and actionable insights. You got to think about the data points that are going to support your findings in the best way. And in our case, we needed to compare browsing preferences across these different user groups. So of course we could distill those points through qualitative questions, in either unmoderated or one-on-one interviews. But by sprinkling in the right quantitative question type, like multiple choice or rating scales, there's kind of a twofold benefit. One is just at a glance, as studies are coming in, you can really kind of see, those findings in real time and kind of know intuitively where your analysis is heading, even before you've actually watched the full videos. And then the other benefit is just having the clear data to present alongside your qualitative findings. The short line there is that these numbers, even though they're not statistically significant, they go a long way with stakeholders when you're presenting, what are your key takeaways. Great. So now I'm going to go actually to our second case study, and this is a fun one because user testing is not just about usability testing. It's also a great tool for formative studies, where you need to help stakeholders sharpen their outlook on a project. And one of these opportunities came to us when our team was engaged to redesign Ellentube, the video destination for Ellen DeGeneres. When our organization started collaborating with Ellen Digital, there was some existing market research and quite a lot of quant data from years of running the product, but there seemed to be a gap in understanding the motivations and the experience goals of people coming to the platform. So to scratch beneath the surface, we led stakeholders through a generative research study to inform personas, which we came out with 3, and then also to build confidence in just a clear direction of how are we going to focus those redesign efforts. So some briefs really fall into your lap and kind of come to you, but in this case, it was kind of the opposite. I had to proactively advocate for the opportunity by educating stakeholders about the value of doing a qualitative study in the first place. and that's a little bit of an organic process. So, opening up the invitation by, setting up informal meetings to talk through the Ellen Digital's past research efforts, because there was a few, and just to kind of have them unpack those findings for us. And then once you start to sort of develop that more of a relationship there, it's also about baselining your understanding, or level setting your understanding of what user research really means, because people from different backgrounds kind of see user research from a different lens. And then once you have that common understanding, then propose a plan, or in this case, I proposed a plan to learn more of a lot of questions along these lines of more generative, open-ended questions. So like things like, how does Ellentube fit into the context of users' lives? What are the behavior patterns that push or pull them to the service? What are users' key experience goals for using the service? And with these types of more generative questions in mind, we outlined a plan to go out and similar to the DCUI case study, we looked at, we spoke to 10 people, and that was across the spectrum of the sort of, quote unquote, super fans, people who are engaging heavily with the site, to people who are just fans of the Ellen show and maybe only watch on YouTube, maybe don't go to Ellentube directly very often or at all. So, kind of, again, looking across the spectrum of users there. And then there's tons of great findings to walk through for this. But I just like highlighting this one because it kind of unlocks the power of doing a more sort of formative study like this. And here it is. So Ellentube is not for entertainment. It's for self-care. Users, and here's the explanation. So users see Ellentube as a place for consistent positivity. And the reason they're watching Ellen videos is to help them with things like reframing their perspective, stimulating their mind, just smiling for a moment and laughing, connecting with their own vulnerability, and escaping negative emotions, whether those are coming from like the sort of like personal realm in their direct life, direct experience, or if they're just from kind of like other media sources. And watching Ellentube videos is really a way to maintain their mental wellness on a regular basis. So that, that kind of like is a different flavor than people go to Ellentube to watch, like funny cat videos. So, you kind of like, when you do these research, you get a totally different perspective. Moreover, we had from this research, we had a healthy understanding of some pain points that needed attention, especially looking at the perspective of a more casual user. So things like clunky UI and overcomplicated navigation schemes were at tension with the more streamlined experience that people generally expect from social media platforms, which leads me to the redesign of our navigation. So the redesign at large was more of a step-by-step approach rather than a complete overhaul and like a big reveal. We kind of just doing one step at a time for the redesign. And one of those first points was updating the navigation. So the original brief that came to us was a nested navigation that was debated pretty heavily on the Ellen Digital side and involved a lot of stakeholder alignment around like, okay, what are these? What is the information architecture? What are the things we need to represent in the nav? And when it came to us, it just seemed a little overburdened, and especially when the way it was being thought of and being brought to life was through like kind of a mega nav where you kind of hover over and then you get sort of like maybe some rich media below. And when we saw that, we went back to our research and we said, okay, well, what would casual users think of this feature and how would they view it? And those folks wanted less noise, and they weren't using the navigation for browsing content. So with that user in mind, we were able to kind of pull them away from that original vision and get them more focused on keeping this updated navigation interaction as minimal as possible while still meeting all those business requirements. So that was really key. And also, this approach saved a lot of development hours, which really nobody was complaining about. And then there is a really great method tied to this one as well, which is that tags are a super powerful feature in user testing. And if you use them wisely, you can speed up analysis quite a bit. So tags the tags you create are ultimately unique to a given study, and will be, will somewhat be related to the objectives that you've defined in the beginning. But as a good measure, watching a couple interview videos, you can then create like a code book of these tags. So, just document what the tags that you're going to use are, so that you can use them consistently across the videos. And that's going to help you just pull out themes as you get to the analysis step. The other thing is in user testing, there's a couple different ways of kind of notating the thoughts you want to capture from a given interview. There's making a note and there's making a clip. And so those are kind of two different little ways of capturing your notes through the video. And both allow you to take that, get that thought down and add a tag. But I suggest just going for clips from the get-go and just making it a habit to just, if you hear something, okay, just hit clip and then take the note and tag it, because it's going to save you time in the end when you're creating highlight reels, which are very valuable for stakeholder presentations and just getting your findings across. And if you already have all those clips created, then you can go back, look through the ones that are tagged, edit the clips as needed, and then get them into the highlight reel. It's just I found a bit of efficiency in that process there. And then the last point here, which is really what the visual on the slide is about, is that, it's not hard to get from user testing and all the notes that you've taken there to a tool like Miro or FigJam. And these tools are great ways to make the process of analysis just more visual, which I love, but also open up collaboration to other people, give them transparency into your sort of sense-making process. And really the technical solve there is you just export the data, all your notes from user testing, and then you can easily pull that into a Miro or FigJam with very little effort. Cool. So that kind of wraps up that case study. So I'm going to pass it back to Doug, and he's going to go through the first couple top takeaways that we're going to give to you guys.
Cool. Thanks, Jonathan. All right. So obviously we have so many insights to give you guys and share, but we did boil them down to just 5. So let's get started. So the first one is dedicate a point person. So it's extremely important to identify your UX research lead, empower that person to craft the test and present the results to the stakeholders. So I firmly believe in a well-rounded team of designers, right? That have expertise in all areas. However, I think it's more important to have an embedded research crew inside your UX UI department, right? That gives you the flexibility, the speed, the dedication, and the ownership. So dedicate that point person, super important. And then number 2 is find your allies and build a culture, right? So Jonathan and I, obviously this is coming from a mega corporation, right? And we know it can be difficult working for companies that large. So for example, there are large centralized teams there, but there's also small teams embedded at the brand level. So it's truly helpful to reach out, form a group with similar interests, share ideas and experiences, then build that culture that cares about UX research and the customer feedback. So having that support system is incredibly invaluable.
Cool. Number 3 then is invite everyone along for the journey. I'm just going to toot this horn again. I know I mentioned it earlier in the presentation as well, but research is an eye-opening experience. And try as we may to distill the findings into compelling, sort of really action-focused narratives, there really is nothing that can compete with the firsthand exposure. Try and make your process as transparent as possible. Invite others to view the raw videos and help you analyze the results. And that is going to take a little effort on your side. This is not going to be part of people's schedules, so you're going to need to do some low-level bribery like coffee or snacks, but just do whatever works. Because trust me, when you get the right person exposed, you gain an ally for user research for good. Number 4, use the user testing team for support. So as much as this sounds like a shameless plug, it's really for real. Especially when you're running the process as a team of one, you need all the help you can get. And the experts at the user testing on the user testing team are wonderful to bounce ideas off of, or spot check specific pieces like screener questions or test plan questions, and really get into the nitty gritty. Like, oh, can you write this in? Maybe this is a little bit biased. Maybe just kind of change the wording here or there. And that stuff is so valuable for a team of one, where you really just it just really helps. That type of peer review really helps level up all the work. And that's not to mention the lovely folks who are also always available by chat. They're killer at getting issues sorted quickly, and don't hesitate to reach out for their help, because they're also just super friendly and nice. Number 5, don't stop at the findings. So yeah, as much as possible, just be outcome obsessed. It's great to learn things, and research is awesome for that, but you need to think through the application. So that starts in the planning phase with getting clear objectives aligned to the product team's roadmap, and knowing where you want to come out with things. But it comes to life in the presentation of your findings. It comes to life in the presentation of your findings as well. When you do that findings presentation, just be prepared to work with the product and designers on the next step. So you can set up a workshop, for example, and take the highest priority key findings, and from those you can create, as a group, you can create how might we statements, and then maybe you focus in on one and you say, okay, let's hit the ground running. Let's take those and let's ideate and come up with 5 different ways to solve this given problem. And then maybe you look at them as a group, you evaluate, just wobbly sketches, and then pick 2, prototype them, and start planning your next test. And that's really the beauty, or that's part of the beauty of this process, is that it's not just one and done. You can't learn everything in one study. Actually, studies are better if you're just focused on a more narrow slice. So really think about how this study will lead you to a design process that's ultimately going to lead to more testing as well. And that's all we have to share today. So thank you so much for your time, and I really hope you found this valuable.